of the outward identifiers of Islam, the things that are from the mumayyizat of the religion that make Islam exceptional and that make us stand out from the rest of the nations. And the days of Eid are days of madhar al-farah wa surur. It's from the maqasid of why we celebrate on the days of Eid, to exhibit our happiness and our gratitude and our thankfulness for Allah Tabarak wa ta'ala. And fasting, and he weakens a person, or it makes a person lethargic, and he takes away some of the energy that a person could devote to glorifying and praising Allah and enjoying themselves in the days of Eid. And obviously it goes against eating and drinking on the days of Eid and other things that were mentioned. And we concluded our discussion yesterday about fasting on the days of Tashriq, which are the 11th, the 12th, and the 13th of Dhul Hijjah, which are the 3 days following the greatest day with Allah Ta'ala, which is Yawm al-Nahr, the day of Nahr, the day of sacrifice, the day of Eid al-Adha. And likewise, fasting on the days of Tashriq. What is said about the days of Eid is said about the days of Tashriq, as was stated by the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in a hadith collected by Imam Ahmad in his Musnad. And that is authentic when he said, Yawm Arafah, the day of Arafah in general, but specifically for the people at Arafah, as we'll come to see today, that it is forbidden to fast. And this is something we'll discuss, whether or not it is actually forbidden. But I mean, one of the statements of the scholars is forbidden for the people at Arafah to fast at Arafah, meaning the Hujjaj, the people are making Hajj. The people are making Hajj. The Prophet ﷺ said that the day of Arafah, the day of Nahr, wa ayamu Tashriq, and the 3 days of Tashriq, Eiduna Ahl al-Islam, wa hiya ayamu aklin wa shurbin wa dhikri lillahi tabarak wa ta'ala. They are our Eid, the day of Arafah, the day of Nahr, and the days of Tashriq. They are our Eid, the people of Islam. They are days of eating and drinking and glorifying and praising Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala. And so, for those who are not at Arafah, it goes without saying, and it was discussed perhaps this weekend, I'm not entirely sure, but in this chapter in Bulugh al-Maram, where it talks about the recommended fasting, then we know that it is highly recommended for those who are not at Arafah to fast the day of Arafah and expiate the sins of the year before and the upcoming year. So we continue today with the prohibition of fasting on another Eid. Is there another Eid besides the day of Fitr and the day of Adha? Al-Jumu'ah. Al-Jumu'ah is a day of Eid for the Muslims. And so, اختصاص الجمعة بالصيام منهي عنه. And specifying Jumu'ah, to only fast Jumu'ah, and he is forbidden. The hadith in Sahih Muslim, and this is hadith number 41 in the numbering on the workbook. Otherwise, in Bulugh al-Maram, it is hadith 689, right? Hadith of Abu Hurairah, that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, لا تختص ليلة الجمعة بقيام من بين الليالي ولا تختص يوم الجمعة بصيام من بين الأيام إلا أن يكون في صوم يصومه أحدكم إلا أن يكون في صوم يصومه أحدكم. He said, do not single out the day of Friday. Do not single out the night of Friday for prayer amongst the nights. Meaning, if you don't normally pray, then don't make Jumu'ah a special occasion to pray the night of Jumu'ah. When is the night of Jumu'ah? The Laylatul, what we will call the night of Thursday, right? The night before Jumu'ah, because the night precedes the day, right? Don't fast, don't pray that night, and especially don't give special attention to praying that night. And if a person isn't normally going to pray, don't make Jumu'ah a special occasion for prayer. And this is something that is binbaazbuildingfund, and it is from the doorway of cutting off the avenues to innovation and to giving importance to things in a way that they were not given to by the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. the night before al-Jumu'ah, is a virtuous night, but just like other virtuous nights, that haven't been approached by the Prophet ﷺ in that way of fasting in the night preceding a virtuous day or something of the sort, then we don't give any special importance to it, any other than what has been legislated of any مثلا تكثير الصلوات والسلامات على النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم, any of sending abundant salat and salam on the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم, and Jumu'ah, which includes the night of Jumu'ah, starting with the entrance of Jumu'ah the night before, all the way throughout the day of Jumu'ah. There is special virtue that has come authentically in the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And that topic, without going off topic, that topic is a big topic. The importance of sending salat and salam on the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And many of the scholars have devoted entire works to the subject of the virtues of sending salat and salam on the Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. From the easiest of them is a book of a Shaykh Abdul Muhsin Abad al-Badr, hafidhahullah wa ra'ahu, on the topic. And from probably the most important, if not the most important book in the history of Islam on the topic is the book Jalā' al-Afham fi fadli as-salati was-salam ala khayr al-anam alayhi afdalu salati was-salam. The book of Ibn Qayyim that is called Jalā' al-Afham, a sizable book that he wrote about the virtue, the superiority, and the meanings of saying sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and the reward that a person gets from that, and the virtue that is connected to that. And so the point here being that, outside of what has been mentioned explicitly in the Sunnah, and that was the action of the Prophet ﷺ, and the habit of the Prophet ﷺ, and the routine of the Prophet ﷺ, and virtuous times, it's not for a person to just decide how they're going to make ta'zeem of something that is azim and Allah, how they're going to magnify and venerate and show importance to something that is great with Allah, that has specificity, from the times of the day or the times of the week or the times of the year or the months of the year, anything of the sort. And along these lines, one of the two authors whose speech we were reading yesterday, who was the Shaykh Abdullah ibn Abdul Rahman al-Bassam rahimahullah ta'ala, in multiple places when he explained these hadith, he, at the end of his explanation of the hadith, he reminds us that there is no basis for fasting connected to any mawalid, any type of birthday celebrations of the Prophet ﷺ or the Sahaba or some awliya or anything of the sort, people who are called the saints or anything of the sort. That has no basis in Islam. Likewise, there's no basis for fasting specifically in the month of Rajab to single it out as though it is a virtuous, because it is from the sacred months. Rajab is from the sacred months, right? You have 3 sacred months connected to Hajj, and then in the times from the time of Ibrahim, he actually, from the beginning of the creation of the heavens and the earth, as Allah said, minha arba'atun hurum, inna iddat ash-shuhuri 'inda Allahi 12 shahran fi kitabillah yawma khalaqa as-samawati wal ard. That the number of months with Allah tabarak wa ta'ala are 12 in number from the time He created the heavens and the earth. So the number of the months and the months themselves were ordained by Allah from the time He created the heavens and the earth. From them are 4 that are sacred. And the 4 that are sacred, 3 of them are directly connected to the Hajj, and they are Dhul Hijjah, obviously, and then the month before, because you got to get to the Hajj, so Dhul Qa'dah, which literally means the month of sitting, and then the month after that, Muharram, right? Muharram, this is the greatest month with Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala. This comes in the statement of the Prophet ﷺ, because it is a month where the people are returning back to their lands for making the Hajj. Returning back to the lands for making the Hajj. And so Rajab, is from the sacred months. And yesterday, just to add something here, we mentioned something that perhaps might have not blipped on your radar when it was mentioned. That the scholars, they say about Hajj tamattu, because we said the exception to fasting on the days of Tashriq was for who? We said there are 3 types of Hajj. Who remembers the 3 types of Hajj? Tamattu, Qiran, and Ifrad, right? The 3 types. And the scholars, they say the difference between the first 2 types is and whether a person goes out of ihram or not, right? It's called tamattu and iqran, right? Or qiran, right? And qiran. So those two types, a person has to slaughter. They have to slaughter. If they cannot find a sacrificial animal or don't have the ability financially for whatever reason, don't have the time, don't have the energy, can't find somebody yuwakkil that they can appoint to slaughter on their behalf, then they have to do what? Have to fast. How many days? 10 days. Three in Mecca, 3 in the Masha'ir, and 7 when they return. 7 when they return, right? So this was the exception to the rule. And we said that the ulama, they say, we quoted yesterday specifically a Shaykh bin Baz, rahimahullah ta'ala, that if a person goes as early as, remembers what month? As early as what month to make Umrah before making Hajj, and they have the intention of staying and they're not going back to the land of their iqamah, the land where they reside. So they could even go to Jeddah, they could go to Riyadh and other places, the scholars say generally. There's some ikhtilaf about that with the scholars, but generally that's a strong view with the scholars, right? That the person who was in that situation, what month? Sha'ban, well, that's a little early. He said Shawwal, which is the month after Ramadan. Because Shawwal, even though it's not a sacred month, is considered min Ashhur al-Hajj. It is from the months of Hajj. And that makes sense if you think about it, because in the past, people didn't have modern day transportation, right? You want to get there, get settled in, let the fever run through you, all the sorts of things that happen when people travel, even to today, right? And people need to get settled in. And so, that is considered, Shawwal is considered, Ashhur al-Hajj, from the months of Hajj. I'm kind of getting besides the point here. So the point is that fasting, going back to the Hadith, fasting the day of al-Jumu'ah. Fasting the day of al-Jumu'ah is forbidden by the Prophet ﷺ, and to be singled out. Praying the night before, right? We don't give special importance to any time of the year in a way that wasn't done by the Prophet ﷺ, and by his companions, in a way that has no basis in the Sunnah of the Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Likewise, the same is said about fasting, giving special importance to fasting. The day of al-Jumu'ah is an important day, but there's no special reward connected to fasting the day of al-Jumu'ah. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, do not single out fasting Friday from among the days, except if it coincides with the fast that one of you is already observing. This hadith is narrated by Imam Muslim, as we heard. Likewise, we have the 690th hadith, hadith number 42. Abu Hurairah, he reported from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, لا يصومن أحدكم يوم الجمعة إلا أن يصوم يوما قبله أو يوما بعده. متفق عليه. That's reported by Bukhari and Muslim. None of you should fast on Friday, the day of Jumu'ah, unless he fasts the day before or the day after. Unless he fasts the day before or the day after. So this is just some further elaboration on the previous hadith. The previous hadith is an-nahi, and that is directed with a qaid, and is a prohibition with the restriction of singling out. It's not forbidden to fast Jumu'ah mutlaqan, absolutely. It is forbidden to specify it with fasting. What is meant by specifying with fasting is explained further in this hadith, right? That you have to either fast the day before or the day after. You have to either have fasted the day before or the day after. In the previous hadith, the Prophet ﷺ said, إِلَّا يَكُونَ فِي صَوْمٍ يَصُومُهُ أَحَدُكُمْ. Unless it is a fast that one of you is already fasting. What would be a clear example of that? The fast of Dawood. The fast of Dawood, which is where a person is fasting every other day. Or a person is fasting every other day, and that is their ada. And that is their practice, or normal practice. Then every other week that's going to inevitably, labud, it's going to fall on the day of Jumu'ah, right? It's going to fall on the day of Jumu'ah. And so in that situation, he is not singling out with fasting. He's not singling out with fasting. And likewise could be said about some other things like another and other things, but will suffice with what we mentioned here. So there's a number of benefits connected to this hadith. From them, the day of al-Jumu'ah is afdalu ayam al-asbu'. It is the most virtuous and best day of the week, as it was narrated in Bukhari and Muslim, and he quotes here Shaykh Abdullah Rahman al-Bassam, the hadith is in the Sunnah of Abu Dawud, as a shorter of the hadith that talk about the fada'il, the virtues of the day of al-Jumu'ah. The virtues of the day of al-Jumu'ah, where the Prophet ﷺ said, أَفْضَلُ أَيَّامِكُمْ يَوْمُ الْجُمُعَةِ, the best of your days, meaning the best days of the week, the best day of the week is the day of al-Jumu'ah. The best of your days is the day of al-Jumu'ah. And this is reported by Bukhari and Muslim. أنه صلى الله عليه وسلم قال ما طلعت الشمس ولا غربت على يوم خير من يوم الجمعة هدانا الله له وضل الناس عنه. The Prophet ﷺ likewise, he said, that there is no day upon which the sun rises or sets that is better than Jumu'ah. Allah has guided us to it, and the people went astray from it. And the Jews and the Christians, strayed from the day of al-Jumu'ah. And some of the ulama, they mention, as Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah ta'ala mentions the Zad and Ma'ad, quoting the various hadith about the virtues of al-Jumu'ah, that it is a day of tadhkir bil mabda'i wal ma'ad. Is a day that reminds us of our origin and our final destination, where we came from. Allah tabarak wa ta'ala, who out of his knowledge and his power, his wisdom, and his mercy, Jalla Thana'u, and his kindness, and he created us and created a world for us, created everything in the world for our use, and made it subservient for us. Tabarak wa ta'ala. And it is a day where we are reminded of our origin, because Adam, and fihi khuliqa Adam. And as the Prophet ﷺ said, Adam was created on that day. And on that day, he was expelled from the paradise and sent to the earth. Alayhi salatu wasalam. And some of the scholars, they say that, as is reported from Abdullah ibn Abbas authentically, as a statement of Abdullah ibn Abbas, that the period of time between his being created and his being sent down to the earth was the time between what and what? What two salats? On the day of Jumu'ah, but like the time between Asr and Maghrib. So riwayah is authentic from Abdullah ibn Abbas radiallahu anhuma, where he said that. And some of the scholars mention something interesting, because there are other reports from Ibn Abbas that said he was in the paradise for 40 years, and this goes into the discussion of how long the 6 days were in which Allah created the heavens and the earth. And Allah, Allah would have created the ardeen and the samawat fi lamha, fi lahda, in a single moment. In a single moment, he created everything. But Allah created things in stages to teach us ta'anni, to take our time with things and do things with itqan and exactitude and so on and so forth. And so the creatures who were being created at the time that they were being created from the malaika and others could marvel over the creation of Allah tabarak wa ta'ala, and they could see the sharaf, the tashrif of Allah tabarak wa ta'ala, and how Allah gave honor to Adam by creating this world for him, that will be dar al-bala for him and for his dhurriyyah. And it is a reminder of the ma'ad. It is a reminder of the final return to Allah tabarak wa ta'ala. So the day of al-Jumu'ah has special status and is considered from the ayat of the Muslims, from the days that recur. There are days of celebration, days of farah and surur, where a person exhibits their best clothing and they bring out their folk, they bring out their family, and they go to the Masjid, Jawami'. That's why the ulama, many of the, most of the madhahib, they hold that the Jumu'ah, it is not, some of them, they actually make it a shart. There's not any concrete evidence for that the masjid must, that the Jumu'ah must be conducted in the Masajid Jawami', and in the larger masajid, as opposed to just the musalliyat and so on and so forth, to the point that some of the scholars, they said historically that the largest masjid, the masjids that they would build the cities around, literally when they were building the cities of the Muslims, they would take the largest building if the city already existed, which was usually a former church, right, in the previous dua, right? Or they would build from the ground up an enormous masjid that could fit everybody. And they would say that it was actually a stipulation for some of the scholars that it be in the largest the largest of the masajid, as opposed to like the neighborhood musalliyat, as the Prophet ﷺ in the Hadith of Aisha and Urwa, أمرنا رسول الله أن نبني المساجد في الدور وأن تطيب وتنظف. The Prophet ﷺ commanded us to build masajid in the residential neighborhoods where the Muslims live, anywhere they can hear the adhan and come in walking distance and that sort of thing, right? And that they be purified and made to have a good smell, right? But those masajid generally weren't used historically for the khutab, for the what we call the service of Jumu'ah, right? So Jumu'ah has a special status, and it's something that should be given special focus and special attention by the Muslims. For this reason, it is not proper to fast on the day of al-Jumu'ah. It is not proper to fast on the day of al-Jumu'ah. So Friday is the best day of the week, and it is the weekly Eid for the Muslims. The Shaykh Abdullah ibn Abdurrahman al-Basami says here, it is the Yawm al-Jumu'ah huwa Eid al-Muslimin al-Usbu'i. It is the weekly Eid for the Muslims. It is the weekly Eid for the Muslims. وَمُجْتَمَعُهُ أَفْضَلُ مُجْتَمَعَاتِ الْمُسْلِمِينَ. And the gathering on the day of Jumu'ah is the best and most virtuous of the weekly gatherings of the Muslims. Siwa Majma'i Arafah. And it is the most virtuous gathering. The weekly gathering for Jumu'ah is the most virtuous gathering after he said the assembling and coming together of people at Arafah on the day of Arafah. Shows you the importance of the day of al-Jumu'ah, right? This gathering on the day of Jumu'ah, it is the most superior and the most virtuous gathering. There's something supposed to be an iman booster for a person, right? That's why those who are mas'ulun an al-khutab shouldn't give snoozers for khutbahs, right? And he put a little work and a little effort into what you do. This is the weekly mandatory dhikr that people have to listen to. Give the people a reminder of what? What we said, the purpose of Jumu'ah is tadhkir bil mabda wal ma'ad. Remind the people of where they come from, what their origin is, and their ultimate outcome in the Day of Judgment. That should be a reminder on a weekly basis of Allah and His greatness and the path that leads to Allah and the destination at the end of that path. This is the purpose for al-Jumu'ah. It's not for politics. It's not for venting and getting things off your chest and talking about, what's going on in the community and I really told them brothers and so on and so forth, right? It's for a person to give constructive criticism and constructive advice about the path that leads to Allah, Tabarak wa Ta'ala, and about the Day of Judgment. And it is a day of celebration, so it should be uplifting. It should be something that lifts up the iman of a person and brings happiness and joy to his heart and that sort of thing. He says, Rahmatullah alayhi, he says, لذا كره صلى الله عليه وسلم صيامه. For this reason, the Prophet ﷺ disliked that Jumu'ah be fast, لأنه يوم زينة وبهجة يظهر فيه المسلم عز الإسلام وقوته ونشاطه. And for those who are more studious, this book, Tawdih al-Ahkam, is probably the best explanation of Bulugh al-Maram, and Allah knows best. Especially with this muqaddimat, going over ulum ala, science of hadith, and going over usul al-fiqh and maqas al-sharia, and then what are called al-qawa'id al-fiqhiyyah al-khamsat al-kubra wa ma yatafarra'u anha, and the major principles of fiqh and so on and so forth, giving you tools. And this, as we mentioned before, was written by one of the students of Asadi, and Asadi, this was his favorite book to teach, even though he doesn't have a published written explanation of this book. This is a book that is for a serious student not to benefit from. And this particular scholar, Abdullah ibn Abdurrahman al-Bassam, rahimahullah ta'ala, in this book especially, and in his explanation of Umdat al-Ahkam, and he goes into a lot of things that are from the wisdoms of the Sharia. Whenever he talks about any of the issues of worship or business transactions or interpersonal dealings or marriage and divorce or disputes or anything of the sort, he goes into a lot of detail he brings a lot of fawaid, a lot of benefits about the wisdoms of why Allah legislated what He legislated and how we benefit personally as individuals and communities from learning the religion and implementing the religion. And so this statement right here is an example of that. He said, fasting on Jumu'ah is discouraged because it is a day of exhibiting beauty and joy, where the Muslims showcase, yudhir al-Muslim, Muslim showcases the izz and the quwwah and the nashat of Islam, and the glory and the strength and the vitality of Islam, and the Muslims coming out in large numbers coming out to the Masjid with good manners, knowing how to park like they have some sense, and so on and so forth, not being a nuisance to their neighbors, and conducting themselves in a way that is befitting for the Muslims, which is very important. The Prophet ﷺ, he was traveling for jihad with some of his companions, and some of them left their amti'ah, they left their goods and their luggage and so on and so forth in ways that blocked the encampment and the tents of their brothers and the walkways and that sort of thing. And the Prophet ﷺ, he said that whoever has done this, whoever has harmed his brother and he created a nuisance for his brother, فَلَا جِهَادَ لَهُ, then there is no jihad for him. And this shows us an example of a hadith that فيه مقال ولكن معناه معتبر. There's a hadith great to be Hasan by Shaykh al-Albani rahimahullah ta'ala. And some of the scholars discuss the chain of narration and differ over its authenticity. However, this part of the hadith I'm going to mention holds validity in light of other texts where the Prophet ﷺ is said to have said, وَإِنَّ سُوءَ الْخُلُقِ لَيُفْسِدُ الْأَعْمَالِ كَمَا يُفْسِدُ مَاذَا الْخَلُّ الْعَسَلِ. And that bad character ruins a person's deeds, just like what ruins what? Fire. No. Like vinegar ruins honey. Just like vinegar ruins honey, right? So it is a day that should be an opportunity, or is an opportunity, for us to showcase the strength of the Muslims and the dignity of the Muslims and the honor of the Muslims and so on and so forth. And we should conduct ourselves and instruct our children and our women folk and so on and so forth in going to the Masjid, returning back from the Masjid if they're going to the Masjid on the day of Jumu'ah, to conduct themselves accordingly. So it's a day of happiness. It is a day to showcase the glory and the strength and vitality of the Muslims. And Nawawi rahimahullah ta'ala, he said, al-hikmatu fi karahati siyamihi annahu yawmu du'a wa dhikri wa ibadah. He says that the wisdom behind disliking fasting on Friday is that it is a day of supplication, remembrance, and worship. فَاسْتَحَبَّ الْفِطْرَ فِيهِ فَاسْتُحِبَّ الْفِطْرُ فِيهِ. So it is recommended to not fast that day. لِيَكُونَ أَعْوَنَ عَلَيْهَا. And this shows us, as some of the scholars understood from this hadith, that the nahi is mahmul ala al-karaha, and that the prohibition is understood in the light of being something that is highly disliked and not something that is absolutely forbidden. Because if it was something absolutely forbidden, they say that it would make a person's fast generally what? Batil. It would make it invalid. His fast would be invalid. And so the scholars, they say if a person fasts on the day, some of the scholars say, many of the scholars say if a person fasts the day of Jumu'ah, it is still valid, but it is disliked. It is disliked. Whatever the case, he says it is recommended to not fast that day. It is recommended to not fast that day, and many of the scholars, they say, as we know, al-aslu bin nawahi at-tahrim, and that the basic rule, the default rule of a prohibition is it makes it forbidden. So why risk it, right? He says here that it is recommended to not fast that day, لِيَكُونَ أَعْوَنَ عَلَيْهَا, and so that he can have more energy in carrying out these acts. لأنه عيد العيد الأسبوعي الذي هدى الله إليه هذه الأمة, because it is a weekly Eid that Allah has guided this ummah to. حين أضل عنه اليهود الذين عظموا السبت, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala caused the Yahud to stray as a punishment, those who venerate the Sabt, the day after Jumu'ah. وأضل عنه النصارى الذين عظموا يوم الأحد, and he caused the Christians to stray from it who venerate the day of Al-Ahad, Sunday. فَالْحَمْدُ لِلَّهِ عَلَى نِعْمَتِهِ وَهِدَايَتِهِ. So all praise and thanks is for Allah for His blessing and His hidayah. That's the end of the statement of An-Nawawi rahimahullah ta'ala, from the explanation of Sahih Muslim. Likewise, he said, وفي الحديث نهي صريح عن تخصيص ليلة الجمعة بصلاة من دون الليالي فذا متفق على كراهته. He says, and likewise in the hadith is a clear prohibition of singling out Jumu'ah to pray the night prayer, and to the exception of other nights, and this is something that is unanimously disliked by the scholars. He says, likewise, Bassam rahimahullah ta'ala, he says, likewise, the two hadiths show us karahati ifradi yawm al-jum'ah bi siyam, karahati takhsisi ليلته بقيام لئلا يتخذ الناس الشعائر لم يأذن الله تعالى بها. He said these two hadith express disapproval of fasting alone on Friday and specifically performing the night prayers on the night before, aiming to discourage practices not authorized by Allah. However, fasting and praying on Friday without intending to single out that day or night does not fall under this prohibition. It says, likewise, these two hadith, they indicate that dislike is removed in two situations. The first is when Friday coincides with the regular fasting habit, such as fasting every other day, and that includes Friday. If a person fasts every other day, as we already heard. And the second is when a person is not specifically single out Friday for fasting, but observes a fast on the day before or the day after. Fourth benefit he mentions here, ظاهر الحديثين تحريم الصيام, that the apparent meaning of the two hadiths suggests a prohibition on fasting on Friday, that it is haram and not just makruh. It's not just disliked, that it is haram. And النهي يفيد التحريم, because a prohibition generally amounts to something being forbidden and made haram. أن هناك أدلة أخرى صحيحة تفيد وجوب الفطر. Just as there are some other evidences, he says, that are authentic, that make it mandatory for a person to withhold from fasting. وتحريم الصيام.
أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله.
To quickly finish with his discussion on this hadith, summarize his speech a little bit. He says that the apparent meaning of the hadith is that it is forbidden, it is haram to fast on the day of Jumu'ah. He says, however, the Jumhur of the ulama and the madhahib, they understood to be impermissible, and they said why? They said because the nahi is directed at, is placed upon the specific characteristic of ifrad and takhsis, as opposed to siyam and qiyam itself, right? Is specifying the day of Jumu'ah or singling out the day of Jumu'ah for fasting and not fasting in and of itself. So this is their reasoning. However, a Muslim should do what is ahwat, what is safer. Why risk it, right? Why do something that might be displeasing to Allah and goes against some of the greater wisdoms of the Sharia and so on and so forth, and that diminish your ability to fully enjoy the day of al-Jumu'ah as you can enjoy it, right? And so we'll move on to the next hadith number 43. Hadith is it 43 with you? My numbering's a little wonky here. 691 is 43 in the workbook, right? Okay. Hadith about mid-Sha'ban, right? وعن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال إذا انتصف شعبان فلا تصوموا رواه الخمسة واستنكره أحمد. He said, the Prophet ﷺ in the Hadith of Abu Hurairah said, is reported to have said, when half of Sha'ban has passed, meaning after the 15th of Sha'ban, then do not fast. The five scholars narrated this, and what he means by the five scholars are al-Bukhari and Muslim, the Ashab al-Sunan, and Imam Ahmad, right? Imam Ahmad, and then he says what here? Was Sankarahu Ahmad, meaning Ahmad viewed the hadith to be munkar, right? Munkar, which is a form of da'if, meaning that the matan of the hadith opposes what is athbat, meaning what is more authentic in the view of Imam Ahmad rahimahullah ta'ala. So as the scholars, they say asharh far'un an tahqiq, right? That, or tashih, that explaining something is almost a form of authenticating a thing. The scholars, as a good point, even if, because of the Shaykh here, he says, and the Shaykh mean both hold this to be inauthentic, and the scholars, many of the explainers of Bulugh al-Maram, they held to be inauthentic, but they still explained it. Why? Why they still explain it? Do all the scholars? Obviously, all the scholars didn't agree to be inauthentic, right? And so there are going to be many scholars who take this as a ma'khad for ahkam, and as a reason why they issue certain rulings and that sort of thing, although the hadith is not authentic. And so for a person who is learning the religion and just learning about those things that are matters of differing between the scholars, the vast majority are differing between the scholars. You would say probably 95%, it probably wouldn't be an exaggeration, if not even greater, of all the masail and khilaf goes to two things, right? There are whole books written by the scholars about why the scholars differ, right? Scholars don't differ on matters of aqidah, right? They differ in matters that are tafsiliyah, that are detailed issues of worship and business transactions and personal dealings and so on and so forth. There's a lot of details of how to apply certain things to certain situations and that sort of thing. Are two general reasons why the scholars differ, and it is either thubut an-nas, the authenticity of the text itself, whether the text itself, meaning the hadith, is authentic, or even an athar from the Sahaba is authentic, right? Or what is called dalalatu al-lafz ala al-ma'na, al-alfaz qawalib al-ma'ani, what are the dalalat? They say about 7/8 of what is called usul fiqh goes back to what is called bab al-dalalat, how words are indicative of their meanings. Now you have the hadith. What does the hadith mean? What does the hadith mean? Hadith, even a hadith, you take the zahir of it, al-zahir is still muhtamal. You have something that's nas, there's only one way to read it, then you have something that's zahir. The obvious meaning is such and such. So we always go with the obvious meaning unless we have evidence to the contrary, but that's still what? Muhtamal. There's still another possible meaning. However, that possible meaning is marjuh. It's a weaker and lesser meaning that isn't resorted to unless we have evidence, right? And so because of these ihtimalat and these possible meanings, for everything that is general, there's usually something that's an exception to the rule. For everything that's unrestricted and absolute, there's usually something that you will find in the text or that you will find in the principles of the religion that could be a restrictive clause for, and that sort of thing. And so these are the alats they are the tools of fahm, of understanding the religion. And they are the ghayatul ahamiyya. They are extremely important for a Muslim to learn. And so it's important to even study those ahadith that are weak in explanations of them to understand why the scholars arrive at certain rulings. And so we're not going to go into any explanation for this because it's time to pray, mostly, right? But we'll just suffice with that the most correct view about this hadith is that it is inauthentic, right? Hadith number 44. Next hadith, right? from a Samma bint Busr, was the sister of Abdullah bin Busr. Right? For those who have heard hadith from Abdullah bin Busr, the famous companion, who narrated a number of hadith, was in Mukthir, and somebody who narrated a lot of hadith, but has a substantial number of hadith anyway. His sister, Samma, reported this, and it is reported from her brother, from her, as a narrator. In some narrations, however, as we'll come to see, this narration is also muftarad, and it is great to be munkar by some of the scholars, and it is inauthentic. La tasumu yawm as-sabt, and this is something that comes our way every couple of years when Ashura or Arafah falls on Saturday, right? It was reported from the Prophet ﷺ that he said, La tasumu yawm as-sabt, don't fast on the day of Sabt, right? It's really hard to say Friday and Saturday, because for those who know, any of the days of the week in English are named after false gods, right? Friday is named after a false god, Thursday is named after Thor, Saturday is named after Saturn, so on and so forth. So in Islamic context, at least, as to say Sept and Jumu'ah and so on and so forth, right? Don't fast the day of Sept, right? إِلَّا فِي مَفْتُرِضَ عَلَيْكُمْ, except for that which has been obligated upon you. فَإِنْ لَمْ يَجِدْ أَحَدُكُمْ إِلَّا لِحَاءَ عِنَبٍ أَوْ عُودَ شَجَرَةٍ فَلْيَمْضَغْهَا رواه الخمسة ورجاله ثقات إلى أنه مضطرب وقد أنكره مالك وقال أبو داود هو منسوخ. Samma bint Busr radiallahu anha reported this from the Prophet ﷺ. This was reported by the five collectors. As we said, the five collectors are the four Ashab al-Sunan, after Bukhari and Muslim, and Imam Ahmad rahimahullah ta'ala. Its narrators are trustworthy, except that it is somewhat inconsistent, meaning that there are some narrators in the chains of narration that are mentioned in different order, and then there is some inconsistency with the reports. And Malik rejected it, meaning that he held it to be munkar, and Abu Dawood said that it is mansukh, that it is abrogated. Abu Dawood was from the close companions of Imam Ahmad rahimahullah ta'ala. Qayyim rahimahullah ta'ala has a nice conversation, a nice discussion rather. I will read a part of it in his Tahdhib Sunan Abi Dawood. Tahdhib Sunan Abi Dawood is Tahdhib Sunan Abi Dawood وبيان بعض عللها ومشكلاتها علله ومشكلاته, and the explanation of Sunan Abu Dawud and a clarification, a discussion about some of the hidden defects in the chains of narration and some of the problematic reports. He says, Al-Athram, who's likewise from the Ashab of Imam Ahmad rahimahullah ta'ala, Al-Athram understood from Abu Abdullah's words, Abu Abdullah here being Imam Ahmad rahimahullah ta'ala, أنه توقف عن الأخذ بالحديث, is that he hesitated to accept the hadith, which is what a person does whenever there's doubt, anything connected to religion. It's a tawaqquf, and you don't do anything, you don't say for or against the thing, you just say I don't know, right? He made tawaqquf in the hadith, and he allowed rakhasa fi siyamihi, and with that he allowed fasting on Saturday, because he withheld from accepting this hadith, right, and didn't give a definitive ruling on accepting this hadith. And he said it was allowed to fast on Saturdays. حيث ذكر الحديث الذي يحتج به بالكراهة وذكر أن الإمام في علل الحديث يحيى بن سعيد كان ينفيه وأبى أن يحدث به، فهذا تضعيف للحديث. واحتج الأثرم بما ذكر من النصوص المتواترة على صيام يوم السبت. He says, رحمه الله تعالى ابن القيم, he said that he allowed fasting on Saturday, citing the hadith that, while citing hadith that supported its disapproval, right? And he noted, al-Athram meaning, noted that the hadith critic Yahya bin Sa'id rejected the hadith absolutely and refused to narrate it. He refused to narrate this hadith, which serves as a criticism of the hadith. And the Athram argued, based upon mutawatir, widely transmitted nusus, text in the hadith regarding fasting on Saturday, that it is allowed. He says, so it is left to say, يمكن حمل نصوص الدالة على صيامه. Just try to summarize a little bit. It could be argued that the text suggesting fasting on Saturday, Ibn Qayyim said, should be interpreted as referring to fasting alongside another day, whereas the hadith that prohibits fasting applies specifically to fasting it alone, just like we say about al-Jumu'ah. However, he said the problem. He said this interpretation aligns with some of the text, and this is a reasonable approach, except that the phrase in the Hadith, do not fast on Saturday except for what is obligatory upon you, indicates a prohibition against fasting on Saturday and non-obligatory cases, whether done alone or combined with other days. Mufradan or mudafan, he said. Whether by themselves. So the wording of the Hadith doesn't allow us to interpret the Hadith that way. The way that it is worded doesn't allow us to interpret it that way. He said, so the exception shows that the prohibition would apply to all forms of fasting on this day, except for the obligatory fast. Had it only applied to fasting alone, the wording would have been, do not fast on Saturday, except if you fast a day before or a day after, as comes in the Hadith about Jumu'ah. I say concerning Jumu'ah, he says, when the permitted fasting is explicitly mentioned as obligatory, it is understood that the prohibition encompasses all other forms of fasting. وقد ثبت صيام يوم السبت مع غيره بما تقدم من الأحاديث وغيرها. And he, in his explanation or his commentary on his tahdib, rather, the Sunan of Abu Dawud, and he quoted some of the narrations, and most of them are inauthentic, but combined together they show that there is some basis for it. He said that there are other reports that show a basis for fasting the day of al-Jumu'ah. He said, كَقَوْلِهِ فِي يَوْمِ الْجُمُعَةِ إِلَّا تَصُومُوا يَوْمًا قَبْلَهُ وَيَوْمًا بَعْدَهُ, like the statement of the Prophet that we heard about the day of Jumu'ah, fasting the day that you fast the day before, the day after, which will be, of course, a Sabt. فدل على أن الحديث غير محفوظ وأنه شاذ. Ibn Qayyim says this shows that the hadith is not mahfuz. The opposite of mahfuz is shadh. It's not any the hadith that is relied upon and well preserved, but it is anomalous. Shadh, right? Anomalous, meaning that it is against what is more authentic. And it goes against what is more authentic without being able to reconcile. And this is another faida that we get from the hadith, because some hadith that are graded to be inauthentic, as is the case here, and with other hadith that are like it, because in and of themselves the narrators may be trustworthy and reliable. However, it opposes what is athbat from scholars who are alam than those scholars who reported that. I mean, what is more authentic from scholars who are more knowledgeable than those who reported it, right? And if it was just a standalone narration, it might have been accepted. And however, it warranted more scrutiny by the ulama, not by some aqlaniyin, some fake pseudo-intellectuals, so on and so forth, who just want to discard a hadith. But this is a scholarly process. Otherwise, you have the process of al-jam'u bayn al-nusus ma amkan. It is from the manhaj of Ahlul Sunnah and Aqeedah and Fiqh and all the abwab of the religion to combine and harmonize between the texts and understand them in light of each other to the best of our ability when there is room for that. And however, if there is no way to harmonize between texts, then the scholars resort, we don't say we say the scholars resort to this method of saying what is more authentic and what is anomalous, what is shadh, right here. واختار شيخنا أنه لا يكره وأنه قول أكثر العلماء. Ibn Muflih rahimahullah ta'ala, in his book al-Furu', he says, Ibn Muflih was from the students of Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah ta'ala. He said, our Shaykh, meaning Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah ta'ala, Shaykh al-Islam, Ibn Muflih, who died in the year 763 after the Hijrah of the Prophet, he said that our Shaykh determined and chose as his preferred view that it is not disliked to fast on Saturday. He said, and this is the view, he said, that is shared by most of the scholars. And it is also what al-Athram understood from this narration. Al-Athram was the Sahih, the companion and the close to Nabi, Imam Ahmed, as we just heard. He said, he further stated that the obligatory fast would not be included in the exception if it were meant to be exclusive. Therefore, the hadith is either anomalous, shadh, or it is mansukh. Who said it was mansukh? In the Matan, Abu Dawud said it was mansukh, who was also a companion of Imam Ahmed, rahimahullah ta'ala. He says this aligns with the methodology. But Mufti said this aligns with the methodology and the approach of the hadith that was taken by the Qudama, Ashabi Ahmed, Alladhina Sahibuhu, Kal Athram wa Abi Dawud. And the earliest companions of Imam Ahmed, such as Al-Athram and Abu Dawud. Quickly, let's just finish. Fasting on the day of Arafah. The hadith of Abu Hurairah, the Prophet ﷺ is reported to have said, to have forbidden fasting on the day of Arafah for those who are Arafah. This is reported by the five, which are the four Ashab Sunan, Imam Ahmad, rahimahumullah ta'ala, except for Tirmidhi, meaning by three of the Ashab Sunan, except for Tirmidhi, and it was graded to be authentic by Ibn Khuzaymah and Hakim Sankarahu al-Uqayli, and al-Uqayli graded to be Munkar. And Shaykh Ibn Uthaymeen, rahimahullah ta'ala, he said in the Zayd, al-Uqayli said, it is da'if and it is munkar, like Uqayli said. لكن له شاهد ثابت في الصحيح من حديث الفضل رضي الله عنها أنها أرسلت إلى النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قدحا فيه لبن وهو واقف بعرفة. However, it does align somewhat with a hadith that is authentic from al-Fadl, that is in the Sahih, that she sent a cup of milk to the Prophet ﷺ when he was standing at Arafah. However, that's not the same thing, right? The Prophet ﷺ doing something here, actually eating and drinking and showing that he's not fasting while Arafah, is not the same as a prohibition from fasting on Arafah, per se. Because there is a what? A special virtue for fasting on the day of Arafah. For this reason, it is reported from some of the Sahaba, and I'm not sure about the authenticity, but it's widely quoted by the scholars when they talk about the ikhtilaf here. It's widely reported from a number of the ulama of the Sahaba, like Ibn Umar and others, that they viewed to be recommended for those at Arafah, if they have the strength to do so, to fast. However, the stronger view is that a person should not fast if they are at Arafah on the day of Arafah. Obviously, the Muslims in their lands, there is great virtue for them fasting the day of Arafah, or for those who are making the Hajj, that is the day of tadarru' in Allah, of pleading with Allah and standing in dua and invocation. It is the day of return to Allah at the place where Allah أخذ الميثاق من ظهر آدم نعمان, يعني Arafah, where Allah took the covenant of Tawheed for mankind, as comes in a multitude of narrations from the Nabi Sallallahu and from the Sahaba, to the point that some of the ulama, like Ibn al-Anbari and others, they quote to be, they say that the nusus, that they are the meaning of at-tawatur al-ma'nawi, that say that the covenant was taken at the beginning of time from mankind, and the reports indicate that this occurred at Arafah. So people are returning back to the place where they took the covenant from Allah Ta'ala. They agreed in the beginning of time, all mankind, that they worship Allah alone without partners. Ta'ala. And so Arafah has that special status and that special importance. It began at Arafah, and the pillars of Islam are concluded at Arafah, and wal Hajju Arafah. The Prophet said, and the Hajj is Arafah. The whole purpose of the Hajj is Arafah, right? And it's to the point that if you miss Arafah, you gotta come back another year. Right? There's no Hajj without Arafah, right? And it is like the statement of the Prophet, some of the scholars say, that there is no salah for the person who doesn't recite Kitab, right? And there are certain things and acts of worship that if they're gone, they are pillars. And if they are gone, then that act of worship doesn't exist. It is batil, it is invalidated. And Hajj, from the most important, if not the most important thing that is from the rites of the Hajj, is the standing at Arafah, and everything that comes after that is a celebration and a sign of demonstration of gratitude to Allah Ta'ala. So the stronger view with the scholars is that it is disliked generally. It is disliked generally to fast at Arafah for the people at Arafah, even though there is discussion about the authenticity of this hadith, and because of the fact that standing while fasting, especially if there is heat, especially while a person is already traveling, so on and so forth, is going to exhaust and tire and fatigue a person. A person's energies could better be used in getting close to Allah and being from those that Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala yubahi bihim al-malaika, that Allah boasts about to his angels when he says, Mada arada ha'una. Don't you see these people? They have come from every place disheveled, with their hair unkempt and so on and so forth. What do they want? Meaning, look at what they want from me. How they want to get close to me. How they want my forgiveness. I bring you as witnesses, that I have forgiven them all. May Allah make us from those who are forgiven by Him. And whether we are at the location of Arafah in our homes, in our homelands on that day, and enjoying the 10 days of the Hajj with getting close to Allah Ta'ala with every act of worship, with His dhikr and fasting and so on and so forth. The next hadith is the last hadith, right? It's counted as two hadith because there's two wordings for the hadith. Hadith 47 and 48 reported from Abdullah bin Umar radiallahu anhuma, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said about the person who fasts perpetually. لا صام من صام الأبد. ما صام من أو لا صام من صام الأبد. But the person who fasts perpetually, meaning every day without ever breaking the fast, has not fasted. Has not fasted. And this is mahmul ala ma'anayayn, and both of them are correct. This is a general principle. If something has multiple possible meanings and they don't clash with each other, and they are all understood to be valid, right? So the two most common things that the scholars say about this hadith, just to summarize, is one, that the person who fasts every day without ever breaking his fast, has done something that goes against the teachings of the religion. The most a person should do in fasting is what? Every other day, right? And ahabul amali Allah wa muhawain qal. The most loved actions to Allah are those that are most consistent, even if they be few. As we say about Abdullah bin Mas'ud and others, they said, تعودوا الخير فإنما الخير في العادة. Habituate yourself to do good, because good is only that which is habitual. So a person is not going to be able to keep that up as their regular routine, right? And the things that I love to Allah, those things that you can keep up, especially as one ages and so on and so forth. A person, when they're young and they're smelling themselves and so on and so forth, and they're feeling energetic and strong and invincible, they decide that they're going to fast every other day. And they, a decade passes and another decade passes, and they get spoiled and they get a wife. As we say that, married people love each other by making each other fat. You make her fat with babies, she makes you fat with good food, that sort of thing. You're spoiled, and now you're not, you don't have that same type of vigor and that same type of zeal. You should do something, develop habits while you're young that you can carry out into elderhood. This is something that you won't be able to maintain when you hit 40, when you hit 50, so on and so forth, and your teeth start hurting and your knees start hurting and your blood sugar starts acting up and so on and so forth, right? Develop sustainable routines of worship, right? This is from the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and from the wisdom of Islam, so that you don't make yourself hate acts of worship. A person takes upon himself, mala yutil, I think that which he doesn't have the ability to be consistent in. And so that's the first and the most common explanation. The second explanation is that a person who does that, going to the point that we just made about developing something as a routine, he acclimates himself to not eating and drinking to the point that he doesn't ever feel like he's fasting. Now, the person who does that, who on a daily basis only eats and drinks outside of, daylight hours, then he won't ever feel like he's actually fasting. It's going to be his natural routine. You see some people who do these various fasts, and they're very important, especially the doctor tells you to fast despite your love of food, right? Go ahead and lose some weight and do yourself a favor and do your family a favor by getting yourself into shape, right? So people, they do all sorts of different types of fasts where they don't eat for 16 hours a day or 18-hour windows and so on and so forth, and they limit themselves to 1 meal a day. Those things are highly beneficial. When you get acclimated to that after your first week of being hangry and upset and snapping at your kids and so on and so forth, and not wanting to take phone calls, and you get used to it, it becomes second nature. You're actually not hungry at a certain hour. So the person who does that on a daily basis, it's like he's not fasting. And this is what some of the scholars are saying the hadith is saying. There's nothing to say that these two meanings go against each other. And he's not really getting the benefit of fasting. The benefit of fasting is an iqama, a shahwa. I need to curb his desires and so on and so forth, right? And he's not really getting that. He's not feeling the pains of hunger, because from the benefits of fasting, it's a muwasa. And it calls you to have empathy and sympathy and compassion for the poor, to know something of their plight and that sort of thing. And if you're just used to that. You're used to not eating and drinking at those hours. And it's like you're not fasting anyways. So that's another explanation that's given by the scholars for this hadith. That's the last hadith, right? Alhamdulillah alladhi bi ni'matihi tatimmu salihat. هذا وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم.